away from that. Terrorists are criminals, and criminal law is there to deal with them and has been. And what goes along with that, and basically the way the Americans did it was that they got rid of the Geneva Conventions so that they could torture people. And everybody's concerned with torture. People in this room seem to understand that you can't redefine torture. I'm very glad. That's a position that it took us hundreds and hundreds of years to get towards. And torture does not involve having an American administration which can claim that waterboarding, a form of controlled drowning, is not torture. The Spanish Inquisition called it water torture. It is torture. And we need to keep pressing on that. We need to educate other people who think that it's acceptable, who've bought this rhetoric, who watch 24, who think that it's a tough world, and to be tough in this world, you've got to do this to people because it's immoral, it's illegal, it's counterproductive, it's morally corrosive on the nations and the people who practice it. It's an abomination and it must stop. But that's all it is, really. Detain people properly, give them due process, and don't torture. It's not a gigantic shopping list that's impossible to achieve. It's a few simple things to get us back to being able to regard ourselves as with any kind of decency whatsoever. So please do send that letter to David Miliband as well, as part of our contribution to trying to do our little bit to, as one of the people said, that each release is important, to get one more person out of that prison. And please, keep on doing that. And thank you very much.
Dealing with the question that was asked at the front in questions about human rights, I think that when you're dealing with, as what Andy said about dealing with terrorists, what separates us in this society, and thought that after 9/11 is what separates this society from those who propagate violence and those who propagate terrorism is civilized standards. And the pillar of any democracy is our justice system. And if we get rid of that justice system, then I don't think there's any difference between us and the terrorists and those who want to propagate violence. And justice, at the end of the day, doesn't just mean justice for ordinary Joe Bloggs. It also means justice for those that we actually fear and those that we hate. They have a right to justice, and they have a right to civilized standards to be applied to them. And that means even the people who are accused of being Al-Qaeda. I was speaking to Omar earlier on that we should look at what happened in this country in the 1970s when people like the Guildford Four and the Birmingham Six were taken from their homes, dragged off the streets, dragged off trains and prosecuted and sent to prison for 16 years, and over 40 high court judges in this country in appeal after appeal turned them back, and eventually ordinary people fought for their liberation, and it was proven that the fact that they were innocent men and women, but they had their lives torn away from them. And it's no different to what's going on in Guantanamo, what's going on in prisons around the world. And Shahid asked the question about, well, can we get justice? Can we get war crimes tribunals? Can we get the International Criminal Court? Well, one problem with the International Criminal Court is that America refused to become a signatory to it. But I am one of those that do believe as a lawyer, and I think it's probably got me into trouble in the past, that I don't think that the courts, I don't think the judiciary are the ones that are going to deliver us justice. Over hundreds of years, it's been ordinary people and it's public pressure that has delivered justice. And when it comes to this, there should be no hiding place for the likes of Donald Rumsfeld. There should be no hiding place for Tony Blair, that Middle East peace envoy, that title that they gave to him. No hiding place for Gordon Brown. No hiding place for David Miliband. They should be pursued to the ends of this world until the day that they die. No different to that German, to that Nazi that was prosecuted successfully yesterday in Germany. 60 years after that man thought that he could get away with the murder and the murder of innocent Jewish men and women in Germany, was eventually prosecuted. There should be no different. Tony Blair, if he came in, as Mike said, worried into that Chilcot inquiry, well, he should have sleepless night after night for what he's been responsible for in this country. And I think we will get justice, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I hope I live to see it. And if not, if I don't hope to live to see it, I hope my son or my family, my children live to see it, that we will one day get justice, and these people will be brought before tribunals and they will be prosecuted, no different to what the Nazis that were prosecuted in the Nuremberg war trials. And I just want to close it off in terms of saying, Tony Blair said in 2005, when he was asked about the CIA rendition flights, He said, I have absolutely no evidence to suggest that anything illegal has been happening here at all. All this stuff about camps in Europe or something, I don't know. I've never heard of such a thing. I can't tell you whether such a thing exists because I don't know. Now, what we know now after 5 years is that that was nothing more than a lie. And the evidence of British involvement in torture just keeps mounting up. And when you have Dame Eliza Manningham Butler, the ex-head of the MI5, said last week that she didn't know anything about torture, and the British intelligence service didn't know anything about torture, and they wouldn't use evidence obtained from torture. There are reasons why we know that her and Tony Blair were lying, because Craig Murray, another man who spoke in this room, in 2003, when he was British ambassador to Uzbekistan, provided documents and was hounded out of the Foreign Service because it exposed British government's complicity in torture. He warned the Foreign Office at that time that intelligence was being passed to Britain from the security services in Uzbekistan that had been obtained through torture. And then there was a second document that he also revealed just before he was kicked out of the service, that said that a Foreign Office lawyer justified the use of information obtained by torture on grounds that this does not break the UN Convention on Torture. This was back in 2003, and Tony Blair said that he didn't know about people being tortured or being brought through for flights. So the reality is that these policies that have been written, as I said earlier on, go right to the top, and these people have to be exposed, and there has to be a public inquiry in this country. And whilst we only have the Liberal Democrats and the Conservative Party so far saying it, there has to be pushed, because after the election, things may well move on, but it'll be up to ordinary people up and down this country, and it cannot be left to Omar and to Muazzim and Binyam and all, the detainees to carry on the fight. It has to be to people in this room to realise that they do make a difference. And what I want to close by saying is that I'm always astounded, but when I watch films like this and when I meet people like Omar, about the simple decency and humanity that these individuals managed to come out of Guantanamo and still have for other people. In this room, again, several months ago, there was an officer who was a guard in those camps who was able to sit on the platform with detainees from Guantanamo and are fighting for justice. The fact that these individuals were not destroyed, they still had the human spirit, they tried to take their lives away, and they still managed to come out of Guantanamo and are fighting for those people that are left behind. If they can do it, then we're not being asked much to do in this room, and I think what I can say from that is if they can continue to do it, then we're not being asked to do very much at all. We can actually make a difference, and we can shut down these camps around the world and start asking the right questions and eventually bring these people to justice.
Really, there's nothing much to say after what Andy and Anwar has said already, but I just wanted to echo and repeat the same thing that many people have said in this room already, and they realize and recognize that Guantanamo Bay is not the only prison that where people are being tortured and people being mistreated and barbarically abused outside the laws. But there are many other prisons similar to Guantanamo Bay, and even if Guantanamo Bay was to be closed, there are more than 700 people locked up in Bagram Base, for example, where they are mistreated in the same way that Bagram people are being mistreated. There are many other secret prisons, more than 20 prisons only in Pakistan, more than 20 prisons run by the CIA and for the CIA, where people disappear and tortured and sold to the Americans. There are places like Romania, prisons in Poland, prisons in the Horn of Africa, prisons in Egypt, in Morocco, in Jordan, many countries, and many people are locked up in those prisons. According to the Ministry of Defense, they are in their thousands, people being tortured, and people have even died and killed and murdered in these prisons. According for the accountability issue that many people spoke about, accountability, I think it's very important to embarrass these people and expose them and bring them to accountability, because I think they are still, even now as we speak, they are still supporting and still campaigning and justifying what they've committed. People like Dick Cheney and Bush and Rumsfeld are still in America at large campaigning and saying that their policy was successful. That's why we here in England, in England and other places, we came together and created and founded the Guantanamo Justice Center, which is basically founded by many members who were in prisons, like Muazzam Beg, me and Binyam, and Jamil Banna and Sami Al-Haj. And we created this foundation. It's one of the causes, or one of the practical actions that we wanted from that organization, is to bring many cases against those people who were involved in all these rendition flights, people who've committed those tortures, people who've legalized, like the 10 lawyers who legalized for Bush to commit those crimes. We want those lawyers to be struck out from the law boards in America, the United States, and we want cases to be brought against Dick Cheney, like we've started some of them in Spain. We've started a case here, as you've heard, in England, and we were planning to start many, many other cases in other countries.